Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be working towards Unit 25 today. I'm going to try and sort of rattle through fairly quickly, but do be aware you can pause and rewind me at any point. Hopefully we'll get quite a lot of work done. Before we really get in, I need you to have Unit 25, the worksheets, ready. We did worksheets 1, there was 3 parts to that previously in the week, and today we're going to do the learning outcome 2, worksheet 2 today. So there's 3 parts. It's related to planning effectively for a job interview. And really the next bit is you actually doing an interview. So one of the real themes I want to sort of drive home is the importance of planning for a job interview. And so really that's what these last two or the last couple of days have been about. It's about preparing you for that interview. Part 3 is actually doing the interview, and then part 4 is just really you reviewing that interview. So the big arrow on the screen is what we're doing today. So we're outlining different types of job interview. We're producing a plan for a job interview, but a lot of that is also is kind of identifying potential themes of questions, and then identifying questions that are likely to be asked during that job interview. So yesterday or the previous few days we've done this. So worksheet 1 was these 3 tasks that are on the screen here. So the first one was really kind of looking into your own skills and how your skills matched the person's specification or the job advert. The second was really looking at how you've researched a company. So, to show that you understand the organization you're applying for. Maybe even just things like their locations, number of employees, the company structure. These are really important things to know before you set foot in that company, or set foot in that interviewer's door. You need to show concern, you need to show interest, enthusiasm for the company. The last one is really a little bit about showing that you understand the issues that company faces. So we asked you to look at issues that affect the company. We were looking at the gym group. So particularly you're thinking about the knock-on effects of this COVID-19. Number one, from just about how things like physical distancing is going to work within a gym environment. You also might look at the effect that might have on expansion plans. You might look at the impact the growth of the home fitness market has had on gym memberships and what gyms are doing to kind of maybe either counter that or work alongside it. So really it was just showing your enthusiasm and your interest for the industry. So today we're going to work on this part, which is worksheet 2. So worksheet 2 is really about identifying interview types. So we're actually looking at 3 worksheets today. Sorry. So we're going to look at 3 different types of interview, and I'm going to sort of go through 2 at a time, and then have a little pause. I would suggest you pause to fill in your worksheets, and then what I want at the end of this presentation is for you to send the worksheets to me. So this is worksheet 2, so you're so again just write straight into the worksheet, or if you want an electronic version to type into, that's fine too. You can, if you wish, type directly into a Word document, but the best way is to write directly into these worksheets. So on the left-hand column, you're going to identify 4 different types of interview that take place. And in the right-hand column, you're going to kind of just show what happens in those interview types, and the format of that interview. So there's a couple of good links I've given. So you can take these off the physical slides that you'll get. So Reed is a major used to be recruitment consultant. So yeah, recruiting organisations. And they have sections on their websites with really nice tips and hints for interviews, for interviewers and interviewees, in fact. So the top one is very well related to this task, and you can actually get most of the information from there. I'd recommend you have a sort of dip into that before we get going. So this is looking at different types of interview. And the second link, the same Read website, is looking at types of interview questions. So the sort of things that interviewers will regularly question you with. So these are the 4 types we're going to look at. So we're going to look at group interviews, telephone interviews, face-to-face interviews, and panel interviews. So you might have a quick think about the type of interviews that you've been exposed to previously. Maybe you've had them going into schools or colleges, maybe you've had them for part-time work, but certainly it's useful to be prepared for the format of the interview, because different interview types require different skill sets, and to a certain extent different types of preparation.
Oh, you're the chairman. Grab your tools because the leg's a bit wobbly on this one. I know I'm late, but ain't nipping around, but I'm 4 hours early. I've brought you a bottle of my homemade hooch. I'm here to see if you would like to go for a drink. Excuse me, can you hold that? Just arrived at this job interview and this building smells really, really boring. Hadouken!
So number 1 is this group interview we're going to look at. So what this entails, you've got here a person chairing this sort of small group of young people, and what a group interview will entail, it varies really. You can have sort of relatively small numbers, like the group that you see here, or can be quite a large selection day. Often there'll be some form of a discussion, but also the group may be given things like problem solving tasks. You might be given team building exercises. You might have a group asked to deliver a presentation or create a presentation. You might as a group discuss a case study, or even do some sort of role play activity. So you sort of think, well, why do recruiters need to or want to do these sort of group interviews? And I think it's quite an interesting opportunity for them to see how you as a interviewee interact with other people. It sort of shows whether you may be the sort of person that's likely to be someone that other people enjoy working alongside. It might show your leadership qualities. It might show it does show your problem solving abilities, depending on the type of activities they give. It even sort of shows your ability to maybe sort of withstand frustrations. Maybe there's a particularly irritating member of the group, and they want to show you to show your sort of tact and your ability to deal with awkward colleagues. But I think it's quite a nice opportunity, if it's done well, for the recruiter to see you in a more work-like situation, dealing with problems, being flexible. So it allows the recruiter to see your ability to interact with others, possibly assess leadership potential, and it's often used as a way of whittling down candidates to a couple of very final, much longer interviews. So you might have a group of, say, 15 people to start with, and the recruiters only really plan to properly interview 2 or 3 at the end, depending on people's performance during that group interview. Some interviews you might have a huge number of people to recruit very quickly. So, for example, let's say you're recruiting, let's say, security staff for a one-off event. That actually what you might do is you might have a really large number of people in the room. You might set them a task. You might ask them to complete certain pieces of paper, certain activities, and then you recruit, even without a face-to-face interview, a large number of people. So in some settings it's used to just whittle down so you can get a really extended final interview. And in some situations, a group interview is used to just recruit a large number of people in a short space of time. Okay, so here we've got someone completing a telephone interview, and this is quite a nice way for companies to kind of determine your quality in a fairly cheap way. So, if you think about the interview process, a face-to-face interview often, it means that you're taking often quite a senior member of staff out of their job role for a good amount of time. There's a lot of preparation within the company that goes on to make sure the environment is looking good, that they present a good sort of front for the person coming in to visit them. So actually the whole thing is very time consuming and can be quite costly for companies. And so the telephone interview allows them to kind of almost do a quick screening in some ways. So it can be used quite early on in a recruitment process to just sort of narrow people down, make sure people are suitable, make sure they can speak well. Make sure they're also the sort of people that devote time to an important call, like a telephone interview. And so, the people, will sort of find space. They'll make sure that they're free for that call. They'll answer in a very professional way. So these sort of things give quite a lot of hints to a company about the qualities that a person might have. So a telephone interview will be a scheduled telephone call that a company will give to an applicant. It can be quite structured. They might have a list of questions that they want to confirm with regards to the application, to confirm that you've got the qualifications, you're available, that you're a suitable person, and then maybe to confirm a couple of details on the CV. They may have a structured list of questions that they ask to determine your understanding of the job role or your suitability for the job role. They may also stick in questions that test your ability to think on the spot and to provide examples of situations where you've performed, maybe for example in a team, or where you've dealt with conflict, where you've helped someone develop, things like that. So it's often used fairly early in the recruitment process to narrow the field often, and it's often used as a way of deciding who to actually bring in for a fuller kind of face-to-face interview. It's quite a cost-effective mechanism of working, because you can complete your phone calls in 10-15 minutes, and it can also assess someone's telephone voice. Particularly if you're working in a call center, it's quite a good way of assessing people's telephone voice, isn't it? If people aren't in customer-facing roles and most of their work is done over the telephone, it's a good way to really determine the sort of phone manners of that person. So the questions can be a structured list, or they can just be general chat. But I think whatever the style, it's important to be prepared. So I've got on here, preparation is the key. It's an interview, so don't expect them to just call up and discuss the weather. You need to. It's about a job, so it's important that you find a quiet area in which to take the call, and be prepared to be in a business-like manner. Have your CV and the person spec to hand so you can refer to it if needed. It might be useful to also prepare answers to key sort of themes or questions that you might expect. So often a recruiter will say, tell us a little bit about yourself. They might ask things like, why did you leave your last job? Where do you want to be in 3 years' time? And it's important to have considered those questions beforehand, so you can give nice, confident answers back to the recruiter. It's also worth just smiling when you're on the phone. The person on the other end can hear it. And also just think about your posture, slouching out, slouched over your phone. People can pick up that body language. So sometimes it might even be used to sit up straight or actually stand up. It makes you feel a little bit more powerful. It sort of frees the chest, allows you to speak more freely. So the interview technique, if you like, or the process, is that you'll receive a call, a scheduled call. The recruiter will confirm certain eligibility for the role, certain qualifications, and often there's a set, structured list of questions to work through to determine your ability to respond usually to job-related questions, but also questions related to your personality, your availability, and your suitability for the job. It's often used as a way of determining who to bring into the interview. So now that what I want you to do is I want you to fill in your worksheet. So the worksheet parts 1 and 2, we've briefly covered group interviews and phone interviews. The links I gave at the start to read are also really good sources of information. So the interview type, we've got group and phone. And then what I want you to pop in on the right hand side is really how you would answer these questions related to those interview types. So what is a group interview and what is the format? So what it is, it's when a recruiter brings in groups of people to be interviewed. So think about the sort of things that happen. The picture that I showed there was a relatively small group of people, and often they take part in discussions. They may take part in group activities, team building exercises, really to determine their ability to work within a group and kind of get a look at them in a work related capacity. So the second thing asks you to explain what sort of things will be done, and then ask what does it allow the employer to see. So again, we discussed about leadership capacity, the ability to be a good colleague, the ability to maybe deal with conflict, maybe it's not always the need to be this sort of the shouty leader, but sometimes it's the ability to give people time to speak and listen. So what does it allow you to show? How can you show your qualities in that environment? So you might show your presentation, your energy, your enthusiasm for the job, your ability to get on with people. And then secondly, you're going to discuss the phone interview. So what is a phone interview? Will it be structured or unstructured? And why might an employer use a phone interview? So it's often there's usually a structured element to a phone call, but there may be just general unstructured chat depending on the kind of job role. You might think, why would an employer use a phone interview? Well, some jobs are very phone based. It also allows employers to speak to a large number of people very quickly without the extra hassle of bringing them in, where people might not turn up. You'll waste the time as that person doesn't show. A phone, you just, if they're not there, just go on to the next person. And then what does it allow you to demonstrate as an interviewee? How can you show your qualities? And a lot of it is, they can tell if you're prepared. They can tell if you've given space and time to this interview process. You can show your enthusiasm, your ability to speak well. So take a pause, answer those two sections of your worksheet, and then we'll press on. Okay, so we move on to the more classic face-to-face interview. So this is the standard. A face-to-face interview is a one-to-one conversation between a candidate and an interviewer. Usually it's sort of a minimum of 30 minutes, can be much longer. It really depends on the job role and a number of other factors. So often they ask quite open-ended questions related to the role you're applying for. So it's often testing your ability to reason about the job role, for you to explain your understanding of that job role. So they might ask for examples of how you'd behave in a particular scenario. So in a gym, they may say, for example, you notice a member always leaves his equipment sweaty and horrible. Other gym members are complaining about it. How do you manage that situation? And you have to think on the spot and think about what you would do. Would you approach that person? Would you hover around them with a spray? Would you and sort of immediately be seen wiping down the equipment as they leave? Would you go over and inform him you've cancelled his membership? How would you behave? And so what they're looking for is characteristics and reasoning that show you'd make you'd consider the correct decision. There may be a little review of your CV and ask you to to kind of explain the skills and experiences you've gained along the way. A little bit of it's testing the CV maybe. If you've said you've managed 50 members of staff, they might ask about the skills you demonstrated. They might sort of test out, is he exaggerating his CV a little bit, or is there, or maybe even he's not making enough of his CV. There might also be short pauses to complete tests and quizzes. So maybe prior to a face-to-face interview, you may be presented with a little task, and during the interview that task is reviewed. So the formats change as people try and sort of jazz up their interview processes and try and squeeze more information out of candidates.
I currently manage a company called Expert Interview Coach, which you can find online. The topic I'm going to talk about right now is how to act and dress for a face-to-face job interview. Let's cover how to act. Firstly, you want to be sure you are absolutely not late, but you also don't want to be too early. Okay? You need to scope out where the job is located the day before so that you give yourself plenty of time to show up on time. Okay? Secondly, you want to be nice to anyone within a 5-mile radius of that company. I say that because you never know who you're going to run into, who you're going to be interacting with in the coffee shop. It could be the person interviewing you. In that context, you also want to be very friendly to the security guard and the receptionist. And don't think that they won't provide their opinion about you, especially since your guard is down at that point. Okay? Then, importantly, when you're waiting in the reception area for the interviewer, don't get too comfortable. What that means is don't sit relaxed in a couch, don't open a book, don't open a magazine or a newspaper. The reason for that is you want to be ready to shake that person's hand at a moment's notice. So sit poised or even stand. Don't be too comfortable. Then you want to act and get ready for the first impression. First impression is the most important thing. Okay, so first impression means a strong handshake. It means smiling. It means looking the person in the eyes, and it means projecting confidence. Okay, that's the first impression. When you're in the interview, you want to act very upbeat. You want to act enthusiastic about the job, enthusiastic about the company, and you want to be listening very intently in the person talking to you. Okay, you want to show high energy, and you want to show that you're a regular person. So let your personality come out. Be personable and be relaxed.
Okay, so the next one is a panel interview, and a panel interviews I think are probably the scarier type of interview, and they involve, as you've got a little video here. I'll play a short section of it, and you can sort of get a feel for the type of process. So it uses different representatives from different parts of the business. So often you'll have, let's say, probably the direct line manager. There may be someone in a senior management position, and often there's a representative from human resources. So quite a lot of resources have gone into that interview process. So they want someone. They're not there to reject you, but it can still be quite a daunting situation to be in. So it's important to be mindful of every person within that room and acknowledge every single person. And they often come with set questions that each one of them will discuss. The reasons for doing this are a couple of reasons. The HR are often there because of the need to adhere to certain regulations with respect to information given at an interview and the type of questions that are asked. They also might just be able to answer more kind of precise questions about benefits, about hours of work, that expectations of work, that kind of thing. There's usually a line manager who may ask questions related to the job role. They might suggest scenarios, ask you to provide examples when you've demonstrated certain skills. And I guess as they're asking these questions in the room together, they can come together and give their own ideas about each candidate. So they'll discuss you, they'll discuss your responses, and come to a more of a group decision. And it's it's quite a fair way of recruiting. It means people don't rely on that sort of gut instinct. So each person has the opportunity to pose questions, and often they can be of a slightly different type or a slightly different nature. So you might have a direct line manager, might ask questions related to operational experience, and provide scenarios that might relate to the job role, specific situations that you might find yourself in. Whereas an HR representative or a senior manager might ask questions related to company values, availability to work, that kind of thing. So I'll give an example of the panel interview. I'll just play the video now, and you can see what goes on. Whilst it's happening, I want you to just think of, well, first of all, I just want you to tell me who are the people involved in that interviewing process. So who are they? And I want you to tell me what questions she struggled on, and think, why did she struggle on it? So it's a 5-minute video or 4-minute video. So you can fast forward it on this if you wish, but it's quite useful to just see the process, to see it in action. I'll probably forward it after about 2 minutes.
The purpose of the interview today is so we can find out a little bit more about you in order to decide who to appoint. We have prepared some questions, and all the panel members will be asking questions as we go through. There's no trick questions in this, they're all about you, so you should be able to answer them. And clearly we will be assessing against elements on the person specification, but at the end of the interview I will give you an opportunity to ask us questions.
That's great, very clear, thank you.
No problem. So okay, the first question is from me, so can you explain to me what first attracted you to this post?
Well, I've been in the same role now for about 3 years, and whilst I've been there I feel I've acquired a lot of skills, and I've applied to put these to good use.
Okay. You mentioned the skills that you acquired in your previous role. Could you explain to me what skills you think you'll be able to transfer into this role?
Yes, I've got good organisational skills. I've also assisted in organising stock orders, and I've also helped out when organising casual staff rotas.
Brilliant, thanks very much.
Good communication skills are an integral part of this role, as is completing paperwork and various bits of customer interaction. Can you demonstrate your written and verbal communication skills?
Yes, I have a C and GCSE English, and also as part of my MVQ, I've actively written assignments. In my current role, I have interaction with customers on a daily basis, so I understand the need for good communication, and also for treating people the way that I would like to be treated myself.
And could you give me an example of when you've worked as part of a team to achieve a particular goal? Do you want me to repeat the question?
My mind's gone blank, sorry, I'm just struggling to think of an example.
Okay, not a problem. Think about your current role. Do you work as part of a team there?
Yes, particularly at busy times, we all dig in to get the jobs done that we need to, even if it means doing the tasks that I wouldn't necessarily normally do.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so you sort of the question that she was struggling on at the end. It's a difficult environment, a difficult situation, isn't it? I think the key thing to remember is under pressure, having that capacity to to rely on or to draw on your own preparation. So for her, she probably should have prepared that question already. So here I want you to now fill in the last couple of sections on your worksheet. So what is a face-to-face interview and what is a panel interview? So what does a face-to-face interview involve? Who will it be with? What sort of questions will you answer and on what topic? So they were quite often sort of quite open-ended questions. So they're not sort of closed questions where you might just give a simple yes or no. You're asked to give examples of things. You're asked to explain things. You're asked to expand on situations you've been in. So a face-to-face involves a one-to-one interview, usually with a recruiting manager or HR representative, and generally there's going to be answering open-ended questions related to the job role, but you might also get questions more broadly to show your thinking, your ability to to reason and respond quickly under pressure. I had a really horrible interview once when I was first job hunting after university, and I was asked to sell a chair to the person that was interviewing me. I thought it was horrible of him. But with hindsight, I should have been prepared for that type of question. It was that sort of role. It wasn't it's a sort of question that similar versions of it are asked around the world. So ultimately a lot of these you need to kind of predict the sort of questions that are going to come out. So we saw that panel interview at the end, so you need to describe what that involves, who's likely to be there, and also why they might use a panel interview. So now we're moving on to worksheet 2B, and what we're looking for is for you to really consider that question in the box. So you can't second guess questions you will be asked, but you should be able to identify the themes that an interviewer will use as they'll be looking to gain information about your suitability. This is often shown within the job or person specification in the interview pack. So you're going to use that to identify at least 3 themes and give your potential responses. So the themes we're going to consider are these ones that might just be quite general questions related to employability, those that are very role specific, ones that might be quite personal questions, questions that might ask you to show how you'll react in different scenarios. There might be some kind of, these are annoying ones where you'll ask behavioural questions. You might be asked kind of, what sort of animal would you be if you were an animal, that kind of business. And performance-based questions, and lastly, conflict-based questions. So ones that sort of ask why you've left your job in the last, from your last employer. So I've got an example here on the left-hand side of themes that you can address. So I want you to just write into these themes. So performance-based questions might be, for example, give me an example of when you've worked as part of a successful team. So I want you to prepare your response to that question. So consider the prompts that I've got in the potential responses box. So have you ever worked in a team or school project or work environment? Did your team work well together? And maybe did you see it achieve more than you would have expected? So do you see yourself as a valuable team member? So ultimately the theme is really a performance based. So give you an example of when you've worked as part of a successful team. And I want you to really create a sort of resource that you can use to show how you'd respond. So you could say, yes, I have worked in a team environment as part of a school project where we were fundraising. Did the team work well together? Yes, for the most part, you could say yes. Initially there was a lot of debate about who would take charge, who would perform certain roles, but after a while we settled down into them. You could then say, did it achieve more than you would have expected? You say, well, yeah, actually we did pull together. We worked extra hard. I think having a team motivated each other. We had a couple of people in really key leadership roles that helped keep everything organised and sort of pulled up the stragglers. So yeah, I think definitely that idea that together everyone achieves more was true. So I want you to think about how you'd answer that question. So give me an example of when you worked as part of a successful team. So I want you to tell me what your response would be. I then want you to create a role-specific response. So the example on the left-hand side is here, a role-specific questions. What do you think are the most important qualities to have as a gym instructor? So I want you to create an answer that shows you understand the need that instructor needs to communicate well and also communicate with people from many different backgrounds. I want you to maybe consider how that person needs to be approachable, and maybe not just approachable, also quite proactive in offering help, in seeing people that need assistance. I want you to consider that they might need to have empathy, that ability to understand people's struggles and understand the difficulties people have exercising, or even staying motivated. So, I want you to consider the qualities, those personal qualities an instructor needs. So if I was an interviewer and saying, okay, tell me what do you think makes a good instructor? And then, what would you say back to me that would make me think, oh, that person really understands the role. It's not just about understanding, how to create an incredible program. Often it's about the people skills. And then lastly, we're looking at this employability based questions. So, I want you to consider, if someone said in an interview, what are your weaknesses? How are you going to answer that? So there is a technique to it. You don't just say, do you know what, I get really angry and aggressive. What are you going to do about it? Ultimately, your weaknesses, you want to give a practical example, but also how you're addressing it. So a lot of people sort of try and take a weakness that actually is a positive. So some people say, I work too hard, I never know when to stop, that kind of thing. I've got an example here which I think is quite a nice way of showing it. So take one example of a weakness and give an example of how you're addressing it. So you could state you had difficulty in managing multiple pieces of work. So you could say, actually, what I was doing, maybe I was devoting too much time on one project and leaving other projects to go. Or when the next piece of work came in, I'd concentrated on that until to the detriment of the other piece of work. But you could say you've been using a time management system. You could say, well, I started to diarize my work. I've started to assign different periods of time to different bits of work to make sure I devote appropriate time to get everything done and don't get sidetracked down an alley going too deep into one piece of work. So you could say you were easily drawn to moving from one piece of work to another, but you now assign specific times to specific projects or pieces of work. So that's quite a nice way of showing it. You could say, actually, one of my weaknesses, I was quite poor with, email. But what I've done, I've taken a little online course. I did activities and tasks to practice scenarios of using email and scheduling systems, and now I'm much better. So ultimately, when you ask for a weakness, show that you're addressing it. And the final sheet asks you to ask questions. So the sheet is on the right hand side. So it says having questions to ask the interviewer always demonstrates an interest in the role. Use the space below to list as many questions that you can think of. It says at least 2. I would say try and get between 4 and 6 questions. So the types of questions you can ask are ones that show an interest in the job and an interest in the role. This is not the time to be silent and say, I understand everything. It's really a prompt for you to show your interest in the company. You may have questions that just fill knowledge gaps. You might just sort of say, what is it about that? I didn't quite understand the expansion plans of the company. Can you just tell me exactly, where do you want this person to fill in exactly? You might have questions that demonstrate your knowledge. So you might sort of say, well, actually, we looked at the gym group and we said, they're planning to open 15 to 20 clubs a year. So, that's great. Is it the same model of gym that they're opening, or are they expanding in a particular region? We saw there was only, I think, 4 or 5 clubs in Wales, so maybe they're growing there. Is it all UK based? They could go global. So sort of show that you've done a bit of research and that you're sort of thinking about the company. And then there's questions to demonstrate motivation. So you might sort of say, is there opportunities to do overtime? You might say, where can people get to in 3 years? How soon do you think it is for someone to take on a management role? So these questions that demonstrate that you're thinking ahead and thinking about your ability to move up within the group are really important. So here's some examples. Don't copy these word for word, but you might want to sort of use these as inspiration. So the first one was what I was saying about the club. So you might sort of say, well, there are 15 to 20 clubs planned to open each year for the next 3 years. What type of clubs are they? Are they staying in that same model? Are you going to open up a load of squash clubs or gym boxes or CrossFit clubs or aerobic studios? What's it going to be? And where are they going to be? What's the geographical spread? How's this company? Where is this company developing? You're then going to ask, what are the company's biggest achievements over the next... I thought you could ask the recruiter, sorry, throw it back to them. What do you think are going to be the company's biggest achievements over the next 3 to 5 years? If in the gym group, that could be them becoming the biggest company in the UK, or the biggest gym company in the UK. They're growing, their expansion's big. It could be that their biggest achievement is getting inactive people into their clubs. It could be that they're making a very real difference to the lives and the quality of lives of thousands of people. And you might ask the recruiter, this is a nice question to ask. You can say, well, what qualities do you see in the people who are most successful in that job role? What qualities make them really good? Because you might not get that job, but actually you're also getting a bit of information from the recruiter, aren't you? They might sort of really tell you actually the skills that they look for and what key words they're looking out for. So that's quite a nice question. What do you see the most successful people in this job role? What qualities do they have? You could really chuck it at them. So when you joined the company, what surprised you most when you joined? It could be a perk, it could be a benefit, it could be an attitude within the company, it could be a sort of an ambition within the company. What were you most impressed with when you joined that company? So putting it back on the interviewer. And then, again, showing your motivation to progress. You could say, what qualifications do you see in greatest demand? And what should I learn? What do you suggest I devote my time to learning? So there's some examples. So I now want you to take your worksheet and I want you to fill up, try and go for at least 4 to 6 questions that you're going to put back to that interviewer. So you've got a nice preparation sheet there. We've got our worksheet 2, we've got parts 1, 2 and 3. So now you've done those worksheets, I want you to scan them and email them to me, but also remember at the end of each week you're posting, or at the end of each completed unit, that you're posting those worksheets to me. Okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to receiving your work soon.